Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. This week we're going to look at the hacks kick, a little bit of a combination of the traditional hook kick and the traditional hacks kick, a shot that we really think is a signature shot of this generation of ITF sparring. So if this shot is one of your favorites, or more importantly, if this shot isn't in your arsenal, stay with us for this episode and find out why it's so effective.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Fight Chat Friday. So in this episode, when we look at the hacks, we're going to kind of give you ideas of using setups for it. We're going to look at how you can set up beforehand, what to look for after if you do miss or even if you land it, and a couple of variations as well. And of course, some nice ways to actually land the shot. Because if you do land this one, it's a massive one on the judges' scorecards because it's quite
Yeah.
visual. And I think because of that, Adrian alluded to it in the intro, because the game right now in ITF is very much front leg dominant, the fact that people can adjust that into that front leg is quite effective. Because traditionally, the axe kick was kind of used off the back leg more so, or switching stances and a big launch into it. But this is kind of like almost like a hybrid now these days of using it from the front leg. So we're going to see lots of examples of this too. Plus, we're going to see some variations to kind of change it up and keep your opponent guessing.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the key factors in this one, we will see it in all of the clips, is that because people are fighting, we say the majority of people are fighting in more of a side-facing stance or a side-fighting stance, the target area for the axe kick has kind of narrowed a little bit. So you're not seeing as much of the shoulders, as much of the body when you're looking at your opponent. So having that little bit of an angle across the face and down, so as you come over the shoulder with that hacks kick, it just kind of it gives it more room for error. There's more. It's kind of like the idea in the traditional sense where you do your middle block. You don't want your hands super extended. You need to make enough of an angle so you have a contact area, and it's the same kind of thing here. If we don't have enough of an angle, it's too easy to dodge. So we need to have a little bit of room right or left. So if your opponent leans, moves, etc., it's still a challenging shot.
Yeah, and this one as well will probably work best when you have a left versus left or a right versus right scenario. Usually that will be the most common way it will come up. So we'll get into a couple of clips and hopefully we'll see this in action.
Absolutely. So we'll just have a look at a few of them and a few hacks kick merchants as it happens.
Yeah, so this one is actually a nice little one on the exit by John Moffat. So not the like the traditional like axe kick and not a complete hacks per se, but it's nice. It's a bit of a mixture of both. And this is a nice one actually. We try this in training in my club this week, and a lot of guys actually were trying to do that suck guys into the corner, and for some reason it just comes up a little bit more often. So that's an interesting little feature of it as well.
People will lean into it. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
The next one is Doyle Durian, who's now fighting for Spain. So this is the traditional attacking version where we're typically looking at a utility chamber, something between a side kick and a turning kick that's allowing them to then flip over the shoulder, and in that very what's now your textbook hacks, that kind of 30 to 45 degree downward angle coming across the blindside shoulder and down through the head.
Yeah, that's a beauty as well because there's no adjustment of his upper body to give the tell that it's coming.
Yeah.
That he can just seamlessly transition between the two of these, so it makes it very, very effective and hard to get a read on.
So again, looking at a more of a stationary shot here from Vitali. As you were saying before we started this, it always helps if they fall down.
Yeah, that it always makes it nicer. But I think like one of the most important things about Vitali's kicking is that he always gets full extension on it. And I think that's an important factor. We actually see that a lot in the other ITF group, in my opinion.
Mm.
But I think he's actually very, very effective at making his kick super long and super visual. And of course, when you fall, it's a nice one. But I think it's a nice option as a counter as well. So that one was more of a counter.
For sure. And this is kind of leading
Yeah.
us into the after, what follows it, because obviously it does a couple of things. So as well as turning the person's head, if they did have a high front guard, it'll take down that front guard as well. So it is opening up that follow on to hands quite nicely.
Yeah, definitely, because it opens up the body, and we covered that. I think it was 2 episodes ago.
Mm.
The importance of adjusting body position because the toes have to go upward. from the side position of a side kick. So they're side facing here, for example, and then they turn up. That naturally changes your body position to be able to punch more full facing. So it's a nice little transition there as well.
Absolutely. And, these are giving us some of the reasons why this kick is actually such an effective scoring shot and such a high percentage scoring shot for those people who have it. Because again, it's not just that the shot itself scores, it's also what the shot sets up. And it's the fact that it can be thrown from that utility chamber that could be a side kick, could be a hook kick, could be a turning kick, and can also reach over that blindside shoulder.
Yeah, and see, the thing about this as well is it's unpredictable. If you just come out and you start to launch this hacks, people are going to be ready for it, and it's not going to work. So we'll see a couple of examples here now coming up where people are able to disguise it and set it up nicely, which is quite important.
So looking at then our before, what comes before the shot, and we'll have two examples. One here, the first one from Julio Carlos.
Yeah, so he uses what we call that trampoline effect. We've seen that now a lot in our videos, using the kind of the bounce of the mat to almost propel himself forward and launch a lovely hacks over the top. Timothy Boss actually makes the right decision and tries to counter it with a band-aid, which is a good band-aid for the hacks, but just the timing is a little bit more on Julio's side.
Very important thing to do when you're doing this one, make sure you're landing in that shorter stance. So you can see in this slow motion as Julio puts his foot down, he's actually in a very short stance, which makes it easy to keep his body tall and carry the weight forward. He certainly enjoyed it.
Yeah, because if he kind of landed heavy with a nice wide base, he probably would have got hit with that, I suppose, wasn't he? With Timmy's ande. Yeah, so that's a good point, yeah.
And then we have Adelina from Romania. Again, this is a shot that she certainly favors.
Yeah, definitely. But again, it's linking up that two ideas we mentioned earlier of closing the distance first. So, and then also almost bringing people into a false sense of security with the side kick. It's not a very threatening one. And then all of a sudden, boom, over the top and you get hit 3 points. So it's a nice little setup as well. And it can be used nicely to close the distance because most of the time it's hard to just lift and go directly to the hacks.
Oh, for sure. And she's also setting this pattern. She's telling her opponent what to expect. I'm going to push at you with this side kick or side turning kick. And in setting the rhythm and then breaking it, she's given herself a huge advantage there and made it much easier to land that downward kick.
Yeah. I think that's the important thing, that when you set that up, that it's going to just launch down on top of you and you're like, oh no, and then you're almost trapped for a second. And that's kind of what we've seen with the Vitali example as well, and then people may fall over and things like that, which makes it even more clear. So if this one lands, it's hard to kind of disguise it and make it look like you didn't get hit.
Yeah, if you don't have an axe kick merchant in your club, you probably haven't, you may not have experienced just how kind of transfixing it is to have a foot appear above your face. You feel like it should be, well, I'm going to, not do the Indiana Jones thing and run away from the boulder. You kind of just step to the side, man, get off the train tracks. But the problem is, in the moment, the foot appears in front of your face or above your head and you tend to look up and that pins your heels to the floor. You're going nowhere. So we're trying to create that effect. When we're the attacker and we want to use this shot, we're trying to immediately flash that foot up here so that your opponent lifts the chin. And if that happens, the heels hit the deck, you're going nowhere and that shot is landing. Unlike Timothy Boss, who reacted really, really well to that and went, I got to get out of here, got to spin.
And that's a very important point too, because our Members Academy will see that in this week's video as well of the exercises we used. This technique isn't for everybody, but what we found out is that it really helps the opposite side who have to deal with that and come up with that problem of the defensive side almost, because when we bring this into sparring, you have to deal with it, and then you can become a little bit more attuned to how to move your body and how to prepare to adjust if it does come over the top. So there's two sides to that. It's a win-win on both sides, even if it's not going to be a technique that you're going to maybe have as your go-to. It's going to be a nice one to have included in your training.
So let's have a look at the miss. So, and it's thinking ahead, I suppose, a little bit to what happens when it doesn't work exactly as planned.
Yeah, so what I really like is the idea of coming over the top. You just miss, and again, using that almost trampoline effect to launch another kick from the same leg. So we see this example here from Adrian's club where there's a hex comes over the top, and then you use the floor to propel yourself back up to almost use you can really go mostly to the body with a turning kick,
Yeah.
but it's important to use the same leg. But the distance then that you gained by missing on the first one, you're going to be much closer and a massive opportunity for you to land the second technique.
Yeah, and I mean, this is just something that, the guys are experimenting. They have some options there. And again, missing and moving back and going directly to hands gives you a second option there. So we have that. Oh, we can miss and trampoline the front foot into the turning kick. Oh, we can miss and use the drop of that to go forwards and bring us to hands.
Mm-hmm.
The important message is that one of the things this kick does, if it doesn't land, is it creates space, as you were saying, Richie. What can we do with that space? Because we've forced movement from our opponent, we've committed them on the straight line, or maybe they've leaned back to avoid it hitting the head and pinned themselves on the floor. So it creates opportunities for follow-on shots. And as we always say, anything anyone has ever practiced with pads, you're good in a straight line going backwards. It doesn't always relate to sparring so well. But in this case, if you can commit the person on the straight line, pin their heels to the ground, then you can open up. Different things can come from there.
Yeah, one thing that I seen this week as we were training this in the club as well is a lot of people almost using a lean to avoid the kick, and
Yeah.
that's a no-no, because if somebody is clever and they can almost use that to set you up, get your weight back, then they can launch into a blitz or that turning kick that we've seen, and you're going to be in big trouble. So we did a lot of posts before on the whole idea of leaning. Great in boxing because you don't have kicks coming at you, but for us in ITF, leaning is almost the last resort.
100%, 100%. So let's look at some variations on this. So when you have that axe or hacks kick in your back pocket, you can then start to style it up and add a few different variations into it. And we'll look at a few competitors just adding a little bit of style to it or finding a way to fit it in.
Yeah, here's Camille. He's able to launch it directly up, and incredible mobility needed to be able to do this, and strength. But if you have the legs and the ability to do this, incredible shot.
For sure. And it is one of those things where, it's adapting in the moment. He hasn't been pushed over, so he still has control of the front leg and the knee high. It makes that possible. You need good fundamentals to be able to allow that, of course.
Yeah, it goes back to the principle we always talk about on this channel of if it's a front leg battle, you must be on top. Camille was on top, so then it gave him an advantage for the second technique.
A different one here from Colin Adolphs altogether. It's certainly one that you can forgive Antti for not quite expecting that to come.
Yeah. But again, Antti is doing a little bit of leaning here, you see, so it gets him in trouble. So that's kind of the point we just made earlier. If you lean, it's probably not the best option against this type of an attack. So you got to watch out for that.
Absolutely, and even though this isn't coming over the blind side shoulder, this is coming more from the front side and down. But it's just showing the kick is versatile. It can be changed. So your reverse turning kick could become a hacks. Your 360 could become a hacks depending on your needs. So again, it's having the basics first allows you to maybe develop some options.
Yeah.
This is just an unusual one altogether. So well done to Michael.
Yeah, that's a great one. No, I know he falls over and leaves the ring, whatever, but still a great shot. Great shot. But like two of these guys, Michael and Colin, these are shots they're landing at the end of the match. So they're not going out and this is like their go-to technique. But it's nice to have the variability and be able to pull off some of these shots as well and have it in the toolkit.
Very interesting though that again, like you were saying, what you discovered in your own club, that as they were pulling towards the corner, it does open it up as a defensive shot, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, really, isn't it? I don't really know why, but it definitely is a factor. I guess people probably commit a little bit more to squeezing you out to get the exit on your side. So maybe their head is a little bit more vulnerable or something like that. But it is a nice one. You just got to be careful then again, of course, that you do land it inside the ring because you may get the headshot and plant it onto the helmet. But if you don't land in the ring, then it's not going to be a score.
For sure. And then, of course, the follow-up to all of this is where do we go from here, and what's next for us?
Yeah, so what we're going to look in our Members Academy this week is first off the capacity and the ability to be able to throw a technique like this. So obviously you need to look at that first, and then we're going to lead you into some variations, looking at ways to train the before and after that we looked at today, as well as set up some situations to make this technique become more apparent, really, and how you can get this into your game. So we did a poll on our YouTube community last week, and we seen, like, look at this. It's very important that the technique is one of the lowest things that most people agree. And these numbers are actually, the votes now are up in the hundreds, I think, and the numbers are still roughly the same. So it shows that the technique itself is not the most important thing. So it's how you can use that and use in your tactical decision making, when to use it, how to use it. And that's exactly the type of training that we are showing our members every single week, of how to be a little bit more tuned into the use of a technique, not just the what, as in the technique itself, but how to use it effectively.
Excellent. So that's us for this week. We'll see everybody next Friday, unless, of course, you're in our Members Academy, in which case we'll see you a little bit later today.
See you in the next one.